It's the rainy night of August 13th, 1972. Inside Pakistan's high-security Rawalpindi jail, guards are actively patrolling, the rest of the prison is dead asleep. But inside cell number 4, 3 Indian fighter pilots are about to pull off something absolutely extraordinary. By morning, those 3 pilots will have vanished without a single trace. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're breaking down one of the most incredible, cinematic, yet entirely true escapes in military history.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because the sheer mechanics of this escape are honestly baffling. The core question is, how did they actually get out? I mean, they didn't break out through the main gate, they didn't just sneak through an open window, and they definitely didn't bribe any guards. So how did 3 high-value prisoners of war just disappear from a heavily guarded facility?
Well, to really understand how they vanished, we kind of have to rewind to see how this all began. It was December 1971, right smack in the middle of the Indo-Pak War. Dileep Parlukar, an Indian fighter pilot, was handed a critical mission: destroy a Pakistani radar station just east of Lahore. Now, Parlukar actually pulled it off. He destroyed the target, but on his way back, his Sukhoi aircraft took a direct hit and caught fire. He was forced to eject, parachuting straight down into enemy territory. He was immediately captured by locals and handed right over to the Pakistani military.
Parlukar was taken to a POW camp for some pretty intense interrogation. The Pakistani officers demanded that he draw a map of the Indian Adampur Air Base in Punjab so they could bomb it. Facing the threat of severe torture, Parlukar didn't refuse, but he didn't exactly comply either. Instead of drawing the military base they wanted, he confidently drew out this highly detailed, completely fake map that was actually just the layout of the civilian Santa Cruz Airport down in Mumbai. It was a brilliant bluff, and it bought him crucial time.
By December 16, 1971, the war officially ended. But the raw numbers from the surrender really set the stage for what happens next. India was holding roughly 93,000 Pakistani soldiers. Pakistan, on the other hand, held only about 500 Indian personnel. So, while a diplomatic exchange was pretty much inevitable, diplomatic wheels turn incredibly slowly. Repatriation could take months or, even years. Parlukar decided right then and there that he wasn't going to just sit around and wait.
So Parlukar immediately starts plotting. But I gotta be honest, his first few ideas were, well, they were a bit too Hollywood. His initial thought was to just steal a guard's revolver during a bathroom break and hold the entire prison hostage. Obviously, he quickly realized that was practically impossible. His second plan involved this loose, rotting window in his cell. He spent days loosening it up, waiting for a massive thunderstorm to mask the sound of it crashing to the ground. But the weather just never cooperated, and eventually, prison maintenance casually strolled by and fixed the window. So, Plan A and Plan B were complete busts.
Realizing he needed a serious, long-term strategy, Parlukar teamed up with 2 other pilots, MS Grewal and Harish Singh. Together, they executed the first phase of their master plan, getting moved into cell number 4. Why the specific cell? Because they had meticulously mapped out the entire prison in their heads. Cell number 4 was the largest, it was situated closest to the outer campus boundary, and most importantly, it had the absolute minimum amount of guard patrols. Through some really clever manipulation, they actually convinced the authorities to move them.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer ingenuity of their next move. They decided to dig straight through the solid back wall of the cell. But how do you dig through a brick wall in a prison without tools? Well, you improvise. They purposefully grew out their beards so they could formally request a pair of scissors from the guards. They secretly hoarded everyday spoons and forks from their meals. Every single night, they'd chip away at the old plaster and brick. And the absolute genius part, to hide the massive amount of debris, they stuffed the crushed brick and dirt into empty care package boxes they'd gotten from home, just covering it all up with a layer of normal trash.
But, it definitely wasn't all smooth sailing. Every morning, they had to perfectly arrange the loose bricks to hide the hole before the guards did their daily head count. To blend the cracks, they shoved this camouflaged rag into the opening. Well, one night, while they were working, they saw the rag suddenly being yanked from the outside. Their hearts absolutely stopped. They thought for sure a guard had caught them. But after a few terrifying seconds, they realized a stray cat was just playing with the fabric. Literally, a random stray cat nearly exposed the greatest escape in their military history.
As the hole got deeper and deeper, they had to figure out where they were actually going to run once they broke out. And they made a brilliant tactical pivot here. The obvious choice would be to head east toward the Indian border. But Parlukar knew the Pakistani authorities would immediately search the routes leading to India. So they decided to go the complete opposite direction, west, through Peshawar and Landi Kotal, aiming for Torkham right at the Afghanistan border. Once they crossed into Afghanistan, they'd be totally out of Pakistani jurisdiction.
There was just one massive problem, though.
They had absolutely no idea how to navigate to the Afghan border. Enter the Olympics ruse. Parlukar spent hours just chatting up the camp commandant, Usman Hamid. Parlukar casually mentioned that upon his release, he was planning this grand overland trip to West Germany to attend the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics. He totally played on Hamid's ego as a seasoned traveler, asking for his help to map out a hypothetical route through Afghanistan. Completely oblivious, the commandant literally handed them the exact escape map they needed. It's crazy.
Finally, the stars align. August 13, 1972. It was the eve of Pakistan's Independence Day, meaning the jail was operating on a skeleton crew, and a massive rainstorm was pouring down, providing the absolute perfect cover of darkness and noise. They pushed out the final layer of plaster and crawled out into the night. And just to throw the guards off their scent, Parlukar deliberately dropped a fake map near the exit, with a route drawn on it pointing towards the Indian border regions of Uri and Punch.
The literal second they were out, they had to blend in. In the weeks prior, they had somehow managed to con the prison tailor into making them traditional Patani suits. They slipped into the local clothing and adopted completely new identities. Dileep Parlukar became Philip Peter, M.S. Grewal became Ali Amir, and Harish Singh became John Jacob. They were no longer prisoners, they were just three ordinary guys melting right into the local crowds heading toward a bus stand.
But wait, back in the cell, they had one final layer of insurance, and that was the fourth pilot, V.S. Chat. Chat bravely volunteered to stay behind. Why? Well, because if all four vanished, an empty cell would immediately trigger an alarm. So Chat stayed back, painstakingly arranging pillows and clothes under the blankets of his three friends to create these lifelike dummies. This incredible act of sacrifice bought the escapees maximum time, completely fooling the guards until the morning head count at 6 a.m.
So, the escapees successfully catch a bus to Peshawar, and then another one to Landi Kotal, putting them literally just miles from the Afghan border. But this is where their perfectly executed heist tragically falls apart. According to the map they had, they needed to find a specific railway station called Landi Khana to orient their final push across the border. What they didn't know, and what that map definitely didn't show, was that the Landi Khana station had actually been permanently closed down since 1932, all the way back in the British era.
Lost and confused in the dark, they had to ask a local taxi driver for directions, and this was their fatal slip. The driver immediately noticed their broken Urdu. Suspicion mounted, a crowd gathered, and soon enough, the local police arrived. Parkal tried to bluff his way out of it, claiming they were Pakistani Air Force personnel on vacation, but it didn't work. They were arrested just a few miles from freedom. Fearing the local police might just execute them on the spot once they found their POW IDs, Parkal boldly demanded they call the camp commandant, Usman Hamid. That phone call actually saved their lives, as Hamid ensured they were safely transferred back into military custody. Their punishment was pretty harsh, 30 days of solitary confinement in separate cells. But the story does have a bittersweet ending. By December 1972, the diplomatic agreements between India and Pakistan were finally finalized. Parwalkar, Grewal, and Singh were placed on a train and officially repatriated to India via the Wagah border. After everything, they finally made it home.
Now, a massive question remains, and it's one you might be asking yourself right now. Why on earth did they take this unbelievable risk? The war was over. A peace treaty was actively being discussed. They were eventually going to be released anyway, right? Why risk being shot in the back in the middle of the night just to escape a few months early?
Well, to really understand their motivation, we have to slow down for a second and look at one deeply sobering number, 54. Following the 1971 war, there were 54 Indian soldiers classified as missing in action. 54 men who were believed to have been captured, but who never returned home in those diplomatic exchanges, ever.
The fear of becoming a ghost prisoner was intensely real and completely justified. There was documented evidence that the diplomatic system was incredibly flawed. Major A.K. Ghosh was literally photographed in captivity by Time magazine, yet he never returned. Flight Lieutenant V.V. Tambe was spotted years later in a Faisalabad jail by his own uncle, but was never released. There were chilling reports from journalists about hidden wards filled with POWs. Parlukar and his men knew that relying purely on diplomacy was a massive gamble with their lives. Escaping wasn't just some act of defiance, it was an absolute necessity for survival against a system where people simply vanished.
2 full years before the war even began, back in 1969, Dileep Parlukar confidently told his commanding officer, "If I'm ever captured, I will escape." And 3 years later, armed with absolutely nothing but spoons, a pair of scissors, and sheer willpower, he fulfilled that exact promise.
It really leaves us to wonder, what are we truly capable of when our survival completely depends on it? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found this deep dive as fascinating as I did.